What's going on, guys? We are back tonight with another video for you, and I want to do something a little different tonight. I had this idea for a video. I might make a series out of it eventually. Basically, the idea, I want to talk trade. So it's going to be like the trade talk segment, and this one specifically, I want to talk about cards that I think are undervalued or maybe kind of overlooked right now that in the future, if given more support, maybe in these specific albums or collections, these cards could end up being a lot more valuable than they currently are, and or potentially staples in certain decks. And I even want to toss in maybe a tech card or two that I think are pretty underlooked right now. So basically just kind of what I'm targeting right now in trade, because as you guys know, how I like to trade is I like to try to trade up, and I've talked about this in some of my other trade videos where I target specific cards for duplicates so that I have good trade fodder in the future when new cards drop that I need. So I like to basically collect good duplicates is kind of my theory. And I usually like to focus on the limited rares and the limited epics as far as good duplicates to kind of trade up into maybe good or decent limited legendaries, because it ends up being where, especially for what I do, I create a lot of different decks where there's so many limited legendaries in the game that I might need a specific one for like an off meta or fringe deck. And well, okay, I might have to relinquish 2 or 3 good limited epic cards to obtain this kind of mediocre limited legendary. So that's kind of what I use them for primarily, just because I build so many decks. But I know a lot of you guys are collection, hunters or try to target kind of like I do, stack up additional cards that you think are good. But, the meta always changes, right? All it takes is one new good card for a specific collection to come in, and then all of a sudden a whole new deck is in the meta, right? So that's kind of today what I want to look at is specific cards that I think could eventually become, into a meta deck, essentially. So if that kind of explains where I'm going with that. So let's take a look. First one on my list is going to be a limited legendary card. And I don't have too many limited legendary cards, but I think this one is kind of often overlooked and not really sought after. And it's a good ability, right? This card says if your deck has exactly 3 cards from any album, those cards, wherever they are, gain 14 until played. So we've seen this a lot. Cards like World Turtle, right? World Turtle's a great card. Very similar, 14 until played. Stats, Goatman specifically is 14 until played. And this can be on your whole deck, basically, but you have to build around it. It's exactly 3 cards. And we've seen other cards in this archetype for the 3 exactly archetype is what I want to call it. There's not a ton of them, but there are definitely examples out there, like Refraction comes to mind as another one. We've got, I want to say Cosmic Engine is one off the top of my head. Let me see. Yeah, so 3 random history, 3 random ocean. So yeah, that one would work good too. So there are these cards that are specific 3-ofs that I could see if they printed a few more. This card could become obviously a staple in those exactly 3 decks. So that's kind of an example of what I'm looking at. You don't see this hardly played at all right now, but in the future, if given more support, I could see this 3-of meta becoming more of a thing, and this card being highly sought after in that 3-of meta. Just similar to World Turtle, right? There's the 4-of meta, specific cards that promote, like Planet X, I think, is specific for a 4-of, right? So let's take a look real quick at that. So if another, later down the line, let's say a limited legendary card drops, or a mythic card drops that's specific for exactly 4 like Planet X, you could see Auto-Tune's price rise pretty quickly. So that's a good one, I think, right there. Another one, and this one kind of flew under the radar for most people, and I tried it out. It flew under the radar a little bit for me until I tried it, and that's the Amazons. We know Greek really early on in this game was a powerhouse collection, and it still kind of is pretty decent. It had a few nerfs, But this card recently got buffed, and I feel like it really kind of flew under everybody's radar just because it says female Greek mythology. And I think the female part kind of threw it off. But when you really go and look at Greek mythology, a lot of the best cards in it are females. So it's really not that hard to throw a really strong Greek deck together and have this card give 22 until played to the majority of your deck. And it feels really strong. I did a video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Pretty recently, shortly after the buff happened to this card, I went and did a video on it, and the deck really surprised me quite a lot. So if Greek did get one more, let's just say one more good card for female Greek mythology, that archetype could really turn into a meta archetype very quickly. Does not take much for some of these decks. You could be one, maybe two cards away, and these things could very well be meta. So don't sleep on Amazons. I think it's right now that 22 until played is really good, and I think it's a little slept on. Next up, I'm going to drop down to the limited rare slot for this one, and we're going to touch on Gingerbread House. Limited rare that gives 18 until played, and it's for 2 collections. You don't see that very often where you're getting such a large buff, especially in a limited rare slot. And I've said this already in a couple of my recent videos that we have cards now coming into the game like Dadaism, where it's very strategic. You have to build, you can't just slam all limited legendaries in anymore. But some of these cards like Dada, let's go to it real quick, are requiring specific numbers of different rarities. And I really like this card for that reason. It promotes deck building. And I could see this becoming more prevalent in the future where they keep printing specific cards with different combinations like Dada, right? So what that does is now it raises the value of rare slots and common slots a little bit more than they already are. So premium commons or premium rares is what I'm after. So again, Gingerbread, going back to that, it's buffing not just one, but 2 different collections, which is pretty good. And Wonders of Construction, in my mind, is really good. There's a lot of good cards in Wonders of Construction, and it's an 18 until played buff, which is really big for a rare. So I think Gingerbread House is a little slept on, to be honest. Kind of an auto-include, definitely a staple in Wonders of Construction in my mind. Pretty much anytime I build it, I try to find a way to get it in there. So I could see that becoming more of a thing coming up in the future. Ooh, excuse me. All right, next on my list, good card all around is Chess. Another limited epic card we're going to take a look at. When played, the card opposite this loses 36, so you already got the cool aspect of it being a kind of a card you can strategize where you want to place it. So it makes the game a little more interactive, a little more fun, right? And Unruly Rulers gets 12 until played, which in my mind, Unruly Rulers, we already saw not very long ago, maybe 6 months back, where it took over the meta once Lionheart released, and then they had to come in and nerf like 2 or 3 cards in that specific deck. So again, in my mind, that deck is probably just 1 card away from being meta again and potentially taking over the meta. With Lionheart being as strong as it is, and again, a little bit slept on itself, I feel like lately. You don't see a Lionheart decks hardly at all. But Unruly Rulers at 28 until played, especially with Machines of War. I did another deck recently, and I thought Machines of War was really strong. I've been winning nonstop with that deck when I play it, and that 28 until played here is probably one of the reasons why. And like I said, with Chess having a good buff on itself with, 12 until played, pretty relevant. So I could see if Unruly Rulers gets 1 more card, this card right here could go up in value. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at cards that have the potential to really go up in value. Maybe grab you a couple copies right now before anything happens, and reap the rewards later is kind of in my mind. Like I said, it does not take much to change a meta on the dime. So here's another one that's really kind of impressed me lately, because like I said, I've been playing that Machines of War deck lately with Lionheart, and I really like it. And this card is like a key card in that deck. And I mean, when you look through Machines of War, there's not a ton of great options, but this one is a standout. When played, Your Machines of War get 15 until played. And on return, if you won the turn, your Machines of War get another 8 until played. So fantastic buff there from a card, especially in the epic slot. That's rare, I'm not sorry, rare. That's a legendary buff right there on an epic. So again, with Dada and other cards in the meta, I'm starting to look more towards these rare, epic, and common cards and saying, where is the potential at? Because I could see this, if this game goes, 5 years down the line, some of these cards you're not going to be able to get a hold of as easy, and they're good trade fodder, right? They're cards other new players are going to be searching out, especially if Machines of War or Unruly Ruler decks become meta again. Hey, look, you've got these cards in the bank, right? Let's take a look at another rare slot. And I mentioned this one the other day, too, in one of my videos. I think this is slept on a little bit, and with this meta right now, I think Sand Dollar, I actually did a video when it first dropped. I thought this card felt really strong, especially for a limited rare. When played, if your deck has exactly 5 Oceans and Seas cards, your non-Oceans and Seas cards, wherever they are, gain plus 10. So basically 130 power on your deck, and you get 53 on it itself. So for 6 energy, 183 power is quite strong and only a limited rare. So again, I could see with cards like Dadaism that this deck could instantly be an all-star in a lot of those types of decks. So that's how I've been building my Dada decks specifically. I've been looking at the rare slot and saying, what has the best rares? And those are the decks I want to build Dada around. And they seem to be doing really well. And this one, no exception to that. Let's see. Next up, another sleeper, I think. And funny that I said sleeper. Oh, REM Sleep. You saw what I did there. Those dad jokes. That guy's hilarious. But anyway, back to REM Sleep. When drawn, if you have played the Moon this game, your cards in hand gain 22 and cost +1 perm. And I really like this permanent buff to your hand type archetype. Like I did last night. I did a hand buff deck basically where you keep getting permanent power. Cards like Rat King, REM Sleep, those types of cards. Chang'e. I think this card combos really well with the Moon. So you got the combo with, obviously needs the Moon, but the Moon, and then you've got Chang'e. Those three kind of create a little combo amongst themselves. And personally, here's what I think. I think later down the line, we're going to see decks, because you can see this card requires the Moon. There's several cards that require the Moon, so it seems like they're pushing this archetype of revolving around the sun and the moon. And I've said it before in a couple other videos as well, where I think that I could see those two decks kind of coming up eventually, where specific cards are buffing the moon specifically and the sun specifically. So basically creating these two different decks that one's based around the sun and one is based around the moon. And right here, perfect card for a deck like that. REM Sleep requires the moon to be able to play. And yeah, I think for sure, like let's real quick, let's type in moon, and I want to see what all we have that requires moons in the deck. We've got specifically, I know there was a couple other legendary cards that required your moon card right there. The moon required in the deck. REM Sleep requires moon. Chang'e requires the moon, like I mentioned. So Moon in Motion requires cards with moon in the name. Another Moon in Motion card. So definitely your cards with moon. So definitely a lot of options here, right? So, and like I said, the sun is doing the same thing. So if you take a look, you can see a lot of cards requiring the sun specifically. Not as good options for this, but you see like right here, played next to the sun. The moon, if your sun contains the moon, the sun, and fire. So yeah, definitely seems like an archetype they're trying to push into. So again, REM Sleep, a little slept on in my opinion. Next up, this is kind of pushed towards new players. I think that Butterflies is a great option that they could push for another new player deck, similar to Birds or Sharks that we saw when they released those Power Play packs. not very long back. But Butterflies feels like it's only one or two new player cards away from being a staple for new players. And I think that's important. This game needs, in my mind, at least 5 or 6 different new player decks that are easy to get a hold of, easy to get a lot of the cards for, and can function even without maybe the limited epics and limited legendary cards that are in that archetype. So in my mind, Chestnut Bob is really good for that. Because look, beautiful butterflies, wherever they are, gain 10 for 6 turns. 6 turns basically means that it's going to be plus 20 by the time you play it again. So you're basically getting a 20 buff for at least a couple turns before it wears off. So, and then it'll be back to 10, but still pretty decent card. And again, in my mind, I think they're going to push some more new player decks in the future. And I think Butterflies is the perfect one to target for that. So, sleeper card. No, you don't see anybody looking for Chestnut right now. Just hang out in those trade rooms. You can see what people want right now. And it's not a lot of these cards. Now, this is completely different here. In my mind, this is a new art or a new collection that just dropped fairly recently, Fears and Phobias. And there's not a lot of cards in this collection yet. But, they just made this collection. They're going to start printing more cards for it very soon. So I think this will be a staple for Fears and Phobias later down the line once it gets more support, because this is a huge buff. When played, your Fears and Phobia cards, wherever they are, gain 24 until played. Massive buff for an epic card. I mean, just completely massive. So I think this, when given more support, is going to be an automatic include in every Fears and Phobia deck. And you get a return effect. Look at this. If you played 13 or more cards this game, your Fears and Phobia cards, cost plus 2 until played. So it's not really a buff. I was thinking it was minus 2. Never mind. So there is a downside to it, but still, huge buff. 24 until played is massive. So definitely going to be an auto include in my mind as that gets more support. I don't think there's a question about that. And let's see, I think this might be my number 10, my final card here. I don't actually own this one, I don't believe. So I need to get me a copy before they're all gone. Meridian Circle is the card I want to mention. And let's see, when played, if played in the middle slot, your constellations and solar system cards, wherever they are, gain 20 until played. So another massive buff for an epic card. And here's why I think this card is a little slept on. Solar systems is a fantastic collection. So we have cards like Olympus Mons, Eris, Sun and Moon, both in that collection. So again, if we see something come about with Sun and Moon, boom, auto include every time, right? And like I said, Eris, you got Planet X. It's not in that collection, but Planet X always going to be an auto include in space decks. So right there, you're getting more additional power. But to have Eris and Olympus Mons in it right there, that's a pretty strong buff to those two cards, if I do say so myself. So I think this card a little slept on right now. Now my final pick is an honorable mention because this is number 11, so I like to throw in an extra card occasionally. But this card is my favorite tech card right now. I'm going to preface with, ooh, tongue twistered. And I feel like you don't see it played hardly. If I can find it. Black Cayman. This card's kind of cool, right? Already has decent stats, 5 energy for 60 power. So even if the ability is, not hit for a specific turn or specific round, it's still pretty relevant because it's got decent stats. But when played, your opponent's life on land and oceans and seas cards, wherever they are, lose 20 this round. So not even this turn, this round. So massive debuff. And I like it because right now in this current meta, what are we seeing? Primates, marsupials. New players are running birds. We're seeing mammal decks. So all these life on land heavy decks are running around everywhere. This card is instantly backbreaking to them when you play it. Also, oceans and seas. What else do we see? New players, sharks, all over the place, right? I mean, not as frequently as it was, a couple months back, but still, fantastic deck that you do see quite frequently. So this deck is a perfect counter for all of those decks running around right now in this meta. Yeah, there are some decks where this is going to brick. Like you've got the arts and culture / science deck with Vitruvian and, consciousness. Yeah, you're going to brick on when you match up there. But again, it still has good base stats. And if your deck's built around a little bit with the oceans and seas, like you're playing Sand Dollar, maybe cards like that, Dada, I mean, you're still needing these slots anyway, and why not have a good tech card against these specific decks that are running over the meta right now? So this is my tech pick anyway. I figured you guys might like that, but yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to show for tonight. Just 10 quick cards, and then, like I said, I got one honorable mention here for my tech slot. But that's kind of what I want to do. I want to maybe create this trade talk series. These are the cards I'm targeting right now. Going to start stockpiling a couple of each. So I have, and then in the future, as different cards release and these cards get more support, we will start trading them off in hopes of, gaining a little more value maybe to my collection, because that's what I like to do. I like to uptrade myself. I like to take a couple epics and turn them into limited legendaries, and it's just my style. I like to do it like that. Take garbage cards, make them good. But all right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this segment. Like I said, I want to try something a little different tonight, so let me know. Shoot me some feedback, comments if you like this or not. I'll continue maybe making these in the future as more cards release and I find more that I think are a little underrated. And we'll continue, or I'll do some different type of trade talk. But yeah, if you got any ideas or if you liked it, let me know in the comments. And as